All right, today's date is January 31st, 2026, and I don't really have a title, so I'm just going to call this Missions Trip to Yemen. That'll be the best title for it. Um, let's go ahead and open in prayer first. Dear Heavenly Father, we just want to thank you so much for this opportunity to come before you, Lord. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak about this special time in my life, Lord. And I pray that your Spirit will speak through me, and this will be a time that that all of us will be willing to listen and hear what you would have us to hear. And I just pray, Father, that you will speak through me. You may pray. Amen. All right. Before we get started, there's a little video that I'm going to use to introduce everything. So I think that's ready, probably. All right. Before we get started, and I will talk about this, but I realized let me just introduce myself for those who don't know me, especially thinking, I know you guys all here know me, I realize that, but the people online. My name is Ruth Hill, and I've been a member of this church for a couple of years. And I I have not ever actually had the opportunity to speak in a regular church service. I've spoken in evening services sometimes and things like that for special things. I was a teacher for many years, and so I've taught Sunday school like almost my entire life. But it's my first time to actually get up on Saturday, Sunday morning, whatever you want to say, and give a message. And so being asked to do this is stepping out in faith, but I was really excited to get the opportunity and excited that God was giving me this opportunity. So what I showed you was a time you saw that there was an actual martyrdom that happened. And in the country of Yemen, back in 2002, there was this martyrdom where 3 missionaries were killed at a hospital that was run actually by the Southern Baptists. And I knew 2 of the 3 people. No, I didn't know them really, really well, but this kind of leads me up to what a really special time in my life. So, but before we do that, if you could show the first slide with the Bible verse, thank you. If I can get to the right one here. Okay, yes. Of course, I got these out of order. Okay, but so this particular verse, if you noticed on the video, the reason I did that video, you might be surprised to know that back in 2000, 2002, YouTube didn't really exist like we know it now. And so there was not actual video of like when they covered this particular story. But Acts 20:24, but none of these things move me, nor do I count my life dear to myself, so that I may finish my race with joy in the ministry which I received from the Lord Jesus to testify to the gospel of the grace of God. And that verse is the verse that you saw at the end of that video. And those 3 individuals were 3 who gave their lives in service to God. And it really is something, if you think about it, a lot of us in this country have probably never known anyone who was martyred for their faith. Maybe you have, but it's not something that we think a lot about in this country because we have freedom of religion. It's like things happen, but for the most part, we can worship however we want to. We are not sitting here afraid that the government is going to walk in and send us all to jail. And in other countries, that is a real issue. And of course, if you could go to the next slide, please. So Yemen, back in 2020, or not 2020, let me try it again. Back in 2000, I had the opportunity to go on a missions trip to the country of Yemen. If you don't know where Yemen is, it's in the Middle East. And if you find basically Afghanistan, just go south, you're going to find Yemen. And it is a country that now is war torn. It's not the country that I even got to go to back in 2000. Now you might think, how on earth did you get to go to Yemen? And how did you get to go on a missions trip? Because missions trips don't happen to the country of Yemen. You actually cannot have a visa that says you're going to Yemen as a missionary. That's not allowed. You wouldn't be granted a visa. They won't let you in the country. Well, what happened is at the time I was married. I was married to a man who believed very strongly that he was called to the country of Yemen. And I knew that, got married to him. We met at actually Southeastern College in Lakeland, Florida. So we both graduated from Assemblies of God College. And there wasn't a lot going on. Assemblies of God at that point, they weren't doing anything in Yemen. There was another missions team called the Red Sea Mission Team, and they were doing some work in Yemen. So we were thinking about maybe going with them. And then it happened that we found that the Southern Baptist, because we got involved, it was kind of a wild thing. We graduated from Assemblies of God and ended up in Southern Baptist. I've been so many different denominations. I'm so grateful to be back in Assemblies of God. I love being Assemblies of God, but I have been involved in a wide variety of denominations throughout my Christian life. But it just so happened that they had a Baptist hospital in Yemen. And so this was something that my then husband was very, very strong about. He wanted to go. And we happened to be talking. We were at a Southern Baptist church at the time. And there was a lady from the Philippines. And she knew the people in Yemen. She knew about the hospital. She had served there. She had worked there. And she was thinking of going on a missions trip to Yemen that summer. And my then husband, he's like, oh yeah, he wants to go. And I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, you can go. I don't, it's just for 3 weeks. I don't really think I need to go. My mom's like, no, you need to go too. Like, this is your opportunity. You should go with him and just see what it's like. Because at that point, I didn't really think I was called to international missions. I was open to it. He wasn't happy that I wasn't called, that I didn't feel called. That was kind of a little problem between us, but I was open. And I said, sure, okay, let's go. And what was really cool is, since it was the first time either of us had gone on a missions trip, the Southern Baptists at that time, they actually gave money that would be like some kind of stipend that you'd get if you were going to go. And then our church was big in helping us raise money. It really, I remember it didn't cost, when it came down to it, we hardly had to pay anything. Everybody was, God was wonderful in blessing us and being able to go on this adventure, this missionary trip to Yemen. The last minute, the Filipino lady said she would not be able to go. It didn't work out for her to go, but we got everything taken care of. We were going to go to Yemen, and I had, at that point, the furthest I'd ever been was Mexico and Canada. I had never been anywhere outside of North America. So this was a big thing. I was getting myself all ready. I remember really reading about the culture and really excited to be making this trip. I had no idea what was going to happen. And so it was a very long flight. We had a couple layovers. I remember that we flew to Germany and we had a several hour layover in Germany. And then we had a layover in Egypt. It's really interesting, since we were going to Yemen, because we were going to Yemen, you could not get off the plane in Egypt. You were not allowed to. You had to remain on the plane. So I remember looking out the window and I could see the pyramids, and I thought that's probably the closest I'll ever get to the pyramids. But I remember looking out and seeing the pyramids. And then we made it to Yemen. And I had no idea. It was wild to get to this place. It was culture shock, but I was so excited about it. Now, I'll take a moment. Something else that I had to prepare for is what I was going to bring with me. And actually what I'm wearing is very similar to what I would have been wearing. I actually would have to button this up, because and then you have to wear long sleeves. As a Western woman coming into Yemen, I didn't have to wear the Yemeni dress, like the whole cover up and all that stuff. I didn't have to do that, but I would have to make sure that high necklines, my arms are covered, long dress, and you did have to wear pants under your dress. And actually, the pants I'm wearing here, it's very similar to what Yemeni women had. We actually bought several pairs while I was there, because the women would make them and they'd sell them to Western women, especially, to get the money, of course. And so the idea was I was always covered. And in addition to that, just to make it easy, and it's not that I had to do this, this was just to make it easier while I was there. Yes, I had several of these scarves, and I would just put that over my head. And that way, at least when I went out, it was at least I was fitting in somewhat with the culture. I stuck out because I'm white. I mean, that, of course, they knew right away, well, you're a white woman. We know that, we know you're a visitor. We know that you're not a Yemeni person. But at least it made it a little bit easier that they knew that I was trying to fit in somewhat with the culture. And I didn't speak Arabic. That wasn't an issue. So it was, of course, that wasn't going to be a big deal because there were translators and there was all that. It was fine. So interestingly enough, so the first night we're there, we were in this capital city of Sana'a, which you'll see if you look at the map up there, you'll see that Sana'a, that was the capital. At this point, the country had had a civil war, but they weren't actively in civil war at that point. Now they've had a civil war and it's all different. But Sana'a was where we stayed the first night. What I will never forget is the next morning being awakened at like 4:30 in the morning to their call to prayer, because it was very jarring. Because when you had the call to prayer that the Muslims would have, they have a loudspeaker, so everybody could hear it. It doesn't make any difference where you are, you will hear it. And my first thought was, this sounds demonic. I mean, that was all. It actually was. It was jarring to my spirit. It was scary to hear it because I don't think I ever got used to it. In the 3 weeks that I was there, I don't think I ever got used to hearing those calls to prayer, because it would happen 5 times a day, because they have 5 times where they would be called to prayer. But so anyway, so that was a real culture shock for me. I'll talk about some other things as we go on here with the culture shock, because there were some other things, of course. But if you go to the next slide. So we didn't stay in Sana'a, the capital, that long. We actually went to Jibla. And this is a kind of like a picture of what Jibla would look like. It's in the hillside. It's like a 3-hour drive. It was really interesting to be on the streets of Yemen, because people didn't really know how to drive. You think they don't know how to drive here. They really didn't know how to drive there. And people were always honking. I mean, it was wild. When you're on those streets, people are honking, they're cutting each other off. Honking was like you heard honking constantly. I think people actually said that they kind of did it almost as, they weren't mad, they just did it. Like there's a horn in their car and they just honked. They just like honked because it was fun to do, I guess. And so you really had to pay attention because they didn't stay in their lanes. They were kind of all over the place. And it was really wild because there were some Australians there, and see, now in Yemen, they drive on the same side of the road as we do, which is kind of interesting. But the Australians had to learn that because, of course, they're driving on the opposite side. But it was kind of interesting because I always thought, well, we're the only people that drive on this side of the road, but actually in Yemen, because I guess they must have Western, probably because the cars are Western. I'm not exactly sure why, but they drive on the same side of the road as us. So it's quite a winding road, a 3-hour drive, and we get to Jibla. And if you go to the next slide, it'll show you kind of where Jibla is. So you can see where Jibla is. And it was a really nice little village. It was, that is where the hospital was. And so going there, what was really nice is we ended up in the hospital itself was what they'd call a Western compound, which was really nice because I'll get to the toilets after a while. The toilets are always a fun thing to talk about. That's always a fun thing. I used to talk to my students about my trip to Yemen, and I talk about the toilets. We spent a lot of time talking about the toilets because they were fascinated by that. And I will get to that because I've got some photos with that. And so if you go to the next slide for us, please. There we go. Yes. And so it really brings me to Yemen. If you were a Yemeni national, in other words, you're born there, you are a Yemeni person, it was against the law for you to become a Christian. Now, if you were an international person, that's fine. You couldn't proselytize, you couldn't tell others and try to convert people. But if you were a Yemeni person, you were not allowed to even become a Christian. There was no preaching of the gospel. But this is the reason I believe that you go on a missions trip. Romans 10:15. And how shall they preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the gospel of peace, who bring glad tidings of good things. And that's what we were there for. We were there to preach the good news. We couldn't go out and do what traditional missionaries do because, again, on our visa, it didn't say that we were going on a missions trip. We told our church we're going on a missions trip. We told other Christians in this country, but you did not mention that because, of course, that would have been like they would have kicked us out of the country. If you're here on a missions trip, you can't be here. You go to the next slide. So that's a mosque, kind of like an idea of there were mosques that were in Jibla, in that village. You had the big mosque, big loudspeakers, so you always heard everything from the mosque. I mean, I remember when we were there for 3 weeks, and they had every Friday, you would hear the message from the mosque. It was so, and I didn't know what they were saying because I didn't speak Arabic. But I tell you, it was angry. They were always angry. That was the thing. Whenever I was hearing this from the mosque, because of course I couldn't go to the mosque. I wasn't Muslim. Of course, I'm a woman, so all those things against me. But I would not have been allowed in the mosque anyway. But I just got this feeling of it's like this guy who he just sounded angry. Whatever he was saying, whatever he was preaching, whatever he was saying, I don't know what he was saying, but it was just angry. But everything would shut down during that time. And of course, you always had the calls to prayer, which sounded very demonic. I never got over that. So you go to the next slide. So that is the front of the hospital. So that's where we stayed. Being a Western compound, what was nice is you couldn't drink the water unless you boiled it. You would get sick if you drank the water, so that would not be a good thing. We did have westernized toilets, which was nice. However, you could not put toilet paper down the toilet. And some of you are, yeah. So there was a trash can that you'd put the toilet paper in there because the toilets were not able to handle toilet paper. What would happen is every day the power would go off at some point, usually in the afternoon or evening. Because we were at the hospital and they had to have power, they always had a backup generator. So we'd always know. Now, that, of course, the village, it would be dark for whatever those couple hours. It happened every single day. But with us, it was nice that if the power went off, it wouldn't be long that the power would kick back on. And then when the power happened to come back on for the village, of course, the generator would go off and then we'd go back to regular power. And so we had a nice little area where we were able to cook, and we had a shower and we had a bed, and it wasn't the luxurious by any means, but it was good. What we had was good. They told us to be careful because there were snakes and there were scorpions, and the doctors at the hospital always had to be watched. They dealt with a lot of snake bites. I remember seeing a scorpion for the first time, and that was a little bit terrifying in our kitchen to look down and see a big scorpion. And thankfully, my then husband, he took care of it, which was good. We were kind of in that Western environment, which was good because when you go out, you realize you're not in Kansas anymore. It's not westernized. You are in the Middle East there for sure. So if you go to the next slide. And that just kind of shows you the village we were in, mountainous, hilly, everything, all the buildings all really stacked close together. If you go to the next slide. Yes. All right, so this shows you a couple things. So you'll see the steps. There were lots of steps, lots and lots and lots of steps. So I was blessed to be able to go out with, there was an Australian couple that was there at the hospital that I connected with. There were a lot of wonderful people, a lot of wonderful people at the hospital. And I do not remember the Australian couple's name. I've tried to look them up. I do not remember their names, but she had a little boy and she was pregnant, and she spoke Arabic, so that was nice. And so her husband worked at the hospital, and then she would go out into the village every day and meet with the women and take her little boy with her. And so it was really cool. She was in a real, they really liked her in the village because here she was, a westernized woman. She had a little boy. She was pregnant. She was like every Yemeni woman's dream, to have a little one and to be pregnant. Like, that's the kind of thing, because women, it was all about women get married, have babies. That's like their whole purpose in Yemen, and to take care of the house. Like, that's their whole world. But those steps, we would have to go up many, many steps, because to go visiting, you sometimes have to go up 3, 4, 5 floors, and they were uneven, very much like what you see there. And then then you also see there's a bathroom, and the bathrooms are really just a little. That's actually nicer than a lot of them, because a lot of them were just a little hole in the ground. And as a woman, I had to learn how to use those bathrooms, and it was not easy. I did not do very well at first. I think my then husband, I think he had an easier time being a man, but man, I'll tell you, it was a challenge. I remember using them the first time, and it's like, that didn't go very well. Took some time. It was always, so most of the time, if I had to go to the bathroom, I would wait till we got back to the hospital and use the bathroom there, because I did not like, but as time went on, it did get a little bit easier. But it was always nice if we happened to be out and there happened to be, like, sometimes there was either a hotel that had a water closet, which was really nice because it would actually flush, and that, because it didn't usually, they were just the nice little hole in the ground. But it was an experience for sure. Let's go to the next slide. So I had been in Jibla, in this village, for a few hours, and the Australian lady said, "Hey, there's a really special thing for us to go to. You want to come? This woman in the village has just had a baby, and would you like to come with us?" And they have a big celebration. It's been like 10 days or whatever since the baby's been born. That's when they have this celebration. And so I'm like, "Oh, sure." I have no idea I'm still jet lagged and everything, because it's like I've hardly been here that long. But I went, and we were one of the first people there, and she gave, and the idea is you give, when you greet them. And by the way, when the women would greet each other, I don't know, wasn't the same for the men, I don't think, but for the women, you would kiss each other on the cheek. It was part of the culture. So you just did it. You kiss either the cheek or on the hand, whichever, depending on the intimacy level. I think with the woman that I went to that time, it's like I had to kiss, and it was this whole thing. It's like they showed me, like, you kiss her hand, she kisses your hand. You kiss her hand, and then the idea was you did this twice, and that second time you're giving the money to her, because that was the thing, is you brought gifts to this woman who had a baby, and everyone in the village, that's the way it would work. And so you'd sit on the floor, packed in like sardines, quite literally. I don't know how many people they must have gotten in this little room. There was a little bit of room, because later on they danced. These women got up and danced, because it was all women and children. And in fact, because in that time I had this really colorful scarf, and they actually asked, "Can we like they like, can we use it?" Because they wanted to dance, and they were really excited about that. So that was quite an experience. It's one of those things that I'm so glad that I got to see this party, and they'd have all this music, and they had some electronic music, but it was very Middle Eastern inspired, I would say. So that was quite an experience, something that I'm glad I got to. If you go to the next slide. All right, so this is two of the drinks that I had to get used to drinking because I didn't drink, amazingly, I didn't drink tea or coffee at this time. Coffee came much later. Now I'm a coffee addict. You'd never know it. But back during these times, I mean, and they told me, you're going to go to these people's houses. They're going to offer you tea. And the tea is that one that's kind of orangish, that tea. They're going to offer it to you, and you need to drink it. Like it would be rude if you didn't drink it. And I'm like, okay. Thankfully, it was sweet because they put honey in it. The water was boiled, so it was safe for you to drink it. And so every time we went visiting, and we were going visiting like every day, the Australian lady would take me. We'd go visiting, and she was my interpreter, which was awesome. And the tea was good. Now the other drink up there is this coffee drink, which I think is pronounced Kishr, K-S-H-R, K-I-S-H-R, I think is the spelling. And it's a coffee drink, but they add all these like whole spices like cloves, and they put milk in it, and they put some kind of honey in it. And so when you drink it, you have all these cloves like in the bottom, like these whole cloves in the bottom. And that's what we had actually at the party. They had that coffee drink, and I wasn't really a fan of it, but I drank it because that's what you do. You are offered, whenever you would go visiting, you're offered something. The good thing to do, what you would always do, is you would not turn down anything that they give you. It was just, and sometimes you weren't sure if what you were being given was really safe to eat or drink. And actually, people said, the missionaries told us, that point you just pray. And so far, they had not gotten sick. God had kept them from getting sick. So, so that was all good. And whenever I would go, now I didn't have any children at this point. I was married, no children. And so the women would always ask me, you don't have any children? No, I'm married, no children. Oh, well, we'll pray for you, because it was very important. Like I was a young woman, and I didn't have any children yet. And that was and so it was always about that they would pray, and they'd speak a blessing over me of, oh, well, for you to have children. If you go to the next slide, please. All right, in James 1:27, it says, pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their trouble, and to keep oneself unspotted from the world. If you go to the next clip. All right, now this is something that I will never forget. These images are from women's prisons that are in Yemen. I remember been there maybe about a week, and we've been going out daily into the village. And of course, whenever I'd go out, the kids were, that was always something too. The kids would always try their English out on me because they learn English in school. So whenever I went out with my Australian friend and her boy, the children from the village would just flock to us, and they'd all be trying out their English. It was so cute to see. But I've been there about a week, and they said there's a group of us that go like once a month to the women's prison. And I'm thinking, women's prison? What on earth is that? Well, women in Yemen are property, and they have no rights. And very often they are married to a man who beats them, and he can take many wives. And so they're not treated right. Sometimes there was the exception, but for the most part, that's a lot of what was going on. So sometimes these women would kill their husbands, and whether justified or not. And these women were then sent to the prisons, and that's what these prisons were for. Their children would have to go with them, or sometimes their children would be born in the prison. And it was very, 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 very heart-wrenching to think about this. These women, their lives were over. If they ever did get out of the prison, their families would kill them. So their lives were over. But from the hospital, there was a group that would go once a month, and they went to speak English with them, teach them like crocheting and different things to keep them occupied in the prison. So I had no idea except that, okay, sure, I'll come with you and we can go to the women's prison. I had no idea what I was doing, what I was getting into. And you walk in, and these photos don't even do it justice. It's so there's nothing there basically. And it is crammed full of women and their children. And these women are so hungry for anyone to, I mean, these people, this group of the hospital is coming and they are greeting you. These are the ones who are kissing you on the cheek, kissing you on the lips. I had that happen. That was a really wild time when this older lady came and she kissed me on the lips, and I was like, okay, that was, but I realized that that was because like nobody, like they are the lowest of the low, the outcasts. No, their families don't come and visit them, of course not. These are the outcasts. These are the women who want want they've killed their husbands, they've done the ultimate sin. It's amazing that they're still alive. But it was really something to sit with the prison. It was full. I remember I sat with a group of women. There must have been 20 or 30 of us in the room, and this one lady, it was clear she was a younger woman, and she was in charge, and she could speak English, and that was her thing. So she was speaking English, she was translating and really getting in and doing that. um, but it's something that just always stuck with me. I've thought back on that prison, that experience. I can't imagine. And it's so amazing to think that this group from the hospital would go every month, and that was the whole highlight of these women's existence, because that's the only time that anyone would show them any love. And so it's one of those moments that's just it's burned in my brain for sure. Okay, if you go to the next one, yes. So when we would go to the houses, you'd always have bread. There'd be some kind of well, usually they have some kind of flat bread that they would they tear apart. If you happen to go for dinner, which I got to go a couple times, or there would be a dinner, you'd always sit on the floor. The food would be spread out, kind of like what you see in the photo. It'd be spread out in like one big platter, and you just would be eating with your hands. There were no utensils. You didn't get to. You would use the bread. The bread was like your utensil. You had to make sure that you had to wash the vegetables. Unless you were going to cook them, you had to wash the vegetables with bleach and water. I talk about that was wild, I know, but that's what you had to do in order for it to be safe. And so the meals I got to share were really special. They were some special moments, getting to be good, sitting on the floor and eating. It was a neat time. I remember there was a couple that brought their son, and they were more westernized, because you could tell the woman, like the man treated her right. They were raising their son to a little more westernized, which was kind of neat. And I remember that they made this dinner. The woman made the dinner for us. It was really nice. So we had some good times like that. If you go to the next one, please. And this is another interesting little thing. So what you see here is something, I think it's pronounced cot, or it's like QAT. Yeah. Yeah, right. And so and this is true. This is like it's a drug, is really what it is. It is a drug. But it grows there, and basically at 2 o'clock, instead of having like what we might have, like a coffee break or afternoon snack or something, this is what they would chew. They would take the plant and they chew it. It kind of just like chill them out, make them, kind of like they could kind of just space out. And so you could tell if you went into the marketplace like around 2 o'clock, everybody's chewing this stuff and they are just all zoned out. And that was a way that they would cope, because they don't have an easy life in Yemen. At this time, they sure did not have an easy life. And so they would be chewing this, enjoying their time. And as I recall, it was even supplied to them. I don't remember if the government supplied it or if it was something very easy for them to get a hold of, because they realized we keep them drugged up, basically, keep them like spaced out. we can kind of do with them what we want to, that kind of thing. We'll just keep, we won't get into trouble. They won't be trying to do anything they shouldn't and trying to, speak out against the government or anything like that. We'll just keep them dumb, keep them drugged up. Okay, if you go to the next one. All right. In Isaiah 61:1, it says, "The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound." And that's really what the hospital, being at that hospital, they could not go out and preach the gospel on the street corner, but they could provide medical services. In fact, my understanding is at some point in that hospital's history, the government actually closed the hospital, and the people were so up in arms about it, the Yemeni people, and they said, no, you've got to open this back up because we know we're going to get quality health care there. We know that the doctors and the nurses are caring, we need it, and the government actually allowed it to be opened back up. And so that's kind of the history of that hospital. If you go to the next slide. And so this was the market. This is like the marketplace. It was wild. It was real. Every village, every area, there was always a marketplace. You didn't go to the store. There might have, I don't even remember seeing, and unless you were in the capital city, you didn't have regular stores. In the capital city, they had a Pizza Hut. I mean, go figure. You really felt much more westernized there. I remember going to the Pizza Hut, so yeah, it was kind of interesting. The only thing they couldn't have is that they couldn't have pork. They didn't serve anything with pork because you could not have pork. But the marketplace is where you got everything. And I tell you, they would do the whole bartering thing that was expected. And of course, the Western people, we always thought we were getting a good deal. Well, we weren't really getting a good deal. The Yemeni people were the ones. They were the ones that you wanted to always have a Yemeni person with you that really knew what to do to get the best price, because we don't know how to barter, and they knew we were Western, so of course they're not going to give us the best price. But I remember going to the marketplace, and it's very much like what you might see in Mexico. I mean, I had seen those marketplaces in Mexico, but it's even bigger because you just don't have a store that you can go to. You get what you need for the day in the marketplace. That's what you do. All right, if you go to the next one. Oh yeah, this is an interesting one. All right, so at some point, our group, and maybe there were about 10 of us at one point, is we went and we got fish at the marketplace. And so we got all this fish, and then we needed someplace to prepare it. Now, I'm glad that the people we were with knew what to do, because I mean, I'm just going along for the ride. We had no idea what was going on. And they said, well, we're going to ask in this restaurant if they'll prepare the fish for us and let us come in and sit down and have dinner. And they made an exception because women were not actually allowed in this. It was a local restaurant. Women were not allowed in this restaurant, but they said, because we're westernized, all that, okay, we'll let you come in. So what you're seeing there, it wasn't really, it didn't look this nice, but it was the best that I could find. It's still the best fish I've ever had. It was fresh fish, because of course they live, they fish, they've got the coast there in Yemen. And they seasoned it, and they used a blowtorch. They blowtorched the fish. And I was like blown away when I heard that. I was like, wait a minute, they're blowtorching the fish? And I'm thinking, what on earth is this going to be? I mean, I was just like, well, this is wild. But they let us come in, prepared the fish. They added bread and hummus and vegetables and all this stuff. So we got a full meal. We were allowed to sit at the table. We're allowed, and we all got to eat together. Of course, eating with your hands. There were no utensils. I will tell you, for like the 9 or 10 of us that were there, all the food that we had, it cost about $20 for the entire meal and letting us come in and prepare. And I remember asking them after we were done. I was like asking the people in charge, of our group. I said, "Well, don't you need us to pay you, to pay you for this, because I'm sure it wasn't cheap." And they're like, "No, the whole thing cost $20." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I couldn't believe it, but it was one of those really, I could not believe the food was so good. I will say the food in Yemen, I never had a bad meal while I was in Yemen. The food was good. I had local food. I had other kinds of food. I had food from the local restaurants. In fact, I remember, so my then husband, he was so I was going around with the women. He was actually working with some other Yemeni people at the hospital doing like custodial type work. And I remember I was there for my birthday, and the week of my birthday, he actually they made a special thing that they don't usually do. They let him bring the actual food from the local with all of their plates and everything, brought it to where we were staying and let me have this special breakfast. And so I do remember that, and that was really good. I remember it being really, really good. So the food was always really good. If you go to the next one, now this is the reason I put this up here. Now, yes, women, you did see women like this is true. But this particular woman is actually, from what I could tell, she's actually a secret Christian. And you might have heard that term, secret Christian. In this country, we honestly, myself included, do not understand what it's like to live in a country where it is illegal for you to be a Christian. It is against the law. You'll be thrown into prison and killed. And we honestly, my mind cannot conceive of that. But we did meet some secret Christians while we were there. And I remember that one of the men that stands out to me, we were actually at one of these big marketplaces, and he is a businessman, local businessman. He had been a Christian for like maybe 20, 30 years, something like that. And he told us in private that when they would have the calls to prayer, because you have the 5 times calls to prayer for Muslims every day, he would have to stop his work and he would pray. Because if he didn't do that, he was already suspected. They already suspected that there was something that was different about him that they didn't know, and he was already being watched very, very carefully. But he would stop and, of course, pray to God. He wasn't doing the Muslim prayers, but he stopped and he would just pray to God during that time. And he could not let anyone know that he was a Christian because he was already being watched so closely. He'd already had some close run-ins from what I remember him telling us. And then I remember there was another guy. He had been married, had lots of children, like maybe 8, 10 children. And I didn't even know until he left. The missionaries I was with said, he's a secret Christian. He is so careful. He doesn't want to let anyone know that he's a Christian because he knows that he and his family would be in danger. I sometimes hear Christians, and I'm not saying here at this church, but I'm just saying you might come in contact with Christians who are here in the US. Well, why would someone be a secret Christian? Why are they? So what? They just need to go and, they can go and be open about their faith, and they should be, and they should just realize that they're going to be killed. That's okay. They'll be killed for their faith. That's really easy to say until you actually come in contact with people who are living that every single day. And so I didn't come in contact with a lot of those people, but on the flip side, if you were international, I do remember that we got to go to, I believe it was a Dutch church. There was a Dutch population that was there. They were allowed to have a church service. Now, from what I remember, that church was eventually closed down. The government closed it. But I remember going to that church service, and the only reason that you could go to that church service is you were not a Yemeni national person. They made exceptions if you were not from Yemen. But if you were a Yemeni person, it was actually illegal to become a Christian. And so it gave me a really different kind of understanding. I know it's hard to think. It's not that they're scared to say that they're Christians. They're scared for their lives. They're scared for their families' lives. And I think that you even see in Scripture that some of the early Christians were meeting in secret. You see that. So it's not, and I know you guys all know that, but it's different when you actually meet these people and these people remain with you, realizing that there are secret Christians and they have to do it in order to protect them and their families. And but I tell you one thing, they also, what I remember, and I just did remember this, God just reminded me, they did not ever call themselves Christians, because the term Christian is looked down upon. Because Christians, we are looked at in our country, we're called a Christian nation. And the country of Yemen looks at Christians, a Christian nation, and they look at the way our nation is, and they're like, no, Christian is bad. They're believers. They're secret believers, and that's what they would be called. They will call themselves believers. They are not Christians, because that's got a very negative connotation. Okay, if you go to the next slide for me. So, the Lord is near to those who have a broken heart and saves such as have a contrite spirit. Psalm 31:18. And that is so true. I saw that. I saw that these people, these Yemeni people that I got to see, that I got to go and visit in the houses, I mean, they were hopeless. There was just no hope. And once in a while, after many years of being able to talk with some of these people, I know that the missionaries once in a while might have one person they get to talk to. After 20 or 30 years of being there in this country, maybe they get to have one person who might convert. But they didn't give up. They were planting seeds, and they were loving these people. They were loving these people in ways that I couldn't even imagine. And just to see that this hospital was so well respected, and the people just loved it. All right, go to the next slide for me, please. All right, now this I could not find, and my photos are not digitized, and I struggled to find my old photos. It was my ex-husband. He did most of the taking photos during this time. But this is henna. It's a special, and I actually got to have, right before I left Yemen, they said, oh, you want to have a henna treatment? I'm like, I don't know what that is, but okay. I didn't know. And this lady, now my hands didn't look quite that, that's much more ornate. Usually in the village, if you're going to have henna, you're going to have this, it's like this dye that they put on like your face and your hands, and so somewhere I have a photo, I don't know where it is, but so I had this, it's almost like a temporary tattoo in some ways. And so, but it's a really special thing. These ladies love doing it. It's like part of their beauty routine. And what I remember is the lady who did it for me was also a secret Christian. I found that out later. I usually would find out after they left. Well, just so you know, that person was a Christian. Oh, and so that was quite an experience. That I just kind of let her do. I had no idea what I was doing. It took a long time it was like on my fingernails for the longest time. I mean, for probably a month or month and a half afterwards. But it was kind of a neat experience. I was glad that I got to do that. It was fun coming home, and and I said, no, I really didn't get tattoos. I promise it's not tattoos. It's it's henna, and this is what part of the culture. All right, so yes, thank you. Yes, so now these three missionaries, and I talked about the Australian couple, and now the Australian couple was not involved in the martyrdom. I just remember they were really neat people. The man in the middle, Bill Kane, he was the administrator of this hospital, and he had been there for literally, I think he was the only one that had ever been the administrator, I think, but I'm not 100% sure. But he'd been there for decades, for at least 20 years, if not more like 30 years at this point. And he and his wife served there. I didn't get to know him really well. My ex-husband got to know him, worked with him a lot more. But I know he was a very fine administrator, and he did a lot of woodworking. You might have seen in the video that the photos of this guy woodworking. He did a lot of that. That was kind of like his thing. And this is one of my very special things. He made this. He would do woodworking and he'd sell it. And this is the country of Yemen. And he would do this, and so this is a special thing because he was one of the men that was martyred for his faith. The lady, the older lady, I only got to be with her for about a week. When I got there, she was actually in the US getting supplies. I think she was from the South. Really neat lady. Once she arrived, once she came back, I mean, she was so outgoing and made me feel very much at home. I think, well, her being from the South, she was definitely a hospitable woman from the South, no doubt. And she was a really neat, just full of so much love and joy. The other lady up there, I did not know her. I never met her. I think that they said that she was actually doing round. Some of the people from the hospital would take like time where they would spend weeks going around to the different villages and offering assistance and go into the village. And I think she was doing that at the time that we were there. But I got to know both Bill and Kathy. And Kathy, I loved. Oh, she was such a neat lady. I just couldn't believe how quickly we connected. And it's like I only knew her for a week, and I felt like I'd known her forever. And these people served Yemen for all this time. They loved the people. They loved working at the hospital. And as you saw in that video, I remember. So we were there for 3 weeks. And we came back, and then I remember it was during Christmas break, because I was a teacher at that time, and the word came over the news that there had been a shooting at the Jibla Baptist Hospital. I'm like thinking, you've got to be kidding! Like, how is that? You know, and I heard it. I remember still hearing that message and thinking, what? And then when they announced who had been killed, and all of a sudden, I mean, I remember getting really emotional about it. I actually, watching the video, I was remembering this, and I was thinking, no, they were shot and killed, and I just could not get over it. And I realized they were martyred. They were martyred for their faith, and it was shortly thereafter. The hospital didn't. It wasn't long before the hospital was closed, or actually transferred over to the Yemeni people. They had been working on actually doing that for a while. They wanted it to be transferred over to the Yemeni people, but everybody pulled out. And now the nice thing to know is I have discovered, in fact, the missionary that was just here was telling me that there are some Assemblies of God missionaries in Yemen now, that there was actually an Ethiopian couple that he knew of that just went. And I was really glad to know that, because as far as I was concerned, I thought, well, everybody's pulled out. Like, there's nothing going on there anymore. And I was glad to know that there still are missionaries. Of course, secret missionaries. They can't call themselves missionaries. If we go to the next slide here. So as I was thinking of the sacrifice that these 3 individuals gave, and it really does get to me, remembering them, even though it's like I wasn't close friends. But the thing is, I knew them and I did talk with them. Revelation chapter 6, verses 9 through 11 says, when he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, how long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? Then a white robe was given to each of them, and it was said to them that they should rest a little while longer. And it really made me think, those 3 individuals who were martyred, that's them. They were martyred for their faith. They were killed for their faith. And they're in heaven. I mean, they certainly, I mean, the rewards, they have no idea. I don't think any of us know how many people that they touched during their lives. And we have no idea. And we are not going to know until we all get to heaven. We're not going to know who actually was saved as the result of their sacrifice. But it just really, it's one of these things that this hangs in my room. When I went through the divorce and stuff, we had a few things that we'd had from Yemen, and some of them, my mom was like, oh yeah, we can get rid of this and get rid of this. And then she got to this and I said, no, This is one thing I'm not getting rid of. This is something that it hangs in my room, and I'm always remembered of those 3 missionaries who gave their lives for Christ. And the fact that I now that I've had that experience, I mean, I don't really foresee myself ever going back to Yemen, but these 3 weeks and then that experience of knowing missionaries who were martyred for their faith have really given me a different perspective on missions and a different perspective on what it really means to pay the ultimate price. And I will never forget them. I will never forget this experience. And although we're talking about 26 years ago, doesn't make any difference. In so many ways, it seems like it's just yesterday. So if you go to the final slide here. So I wanted to open this up to, I'm not saying that I have all the answers, but you might have had questions. If you have questions, maybe something that you wondered about that I mentioned, or anything else about Yemen, I may or may not know the answer, but if anybody had questions. Anybody? Okay, great, yeah.
So when you're in the prison, are they ministering to the ladies, or what are they actually doing when they're there?
Good question. They are, I don't really believe they were ever talking about God, because they would probably, if that came out, I have a feeling that the people in charge of the prison would like kick them out, because you aren't allowed to proselytize. But they were talking with them, teaching them skills like crocheting or needlepoint, or I think it was crocheting if I remember right. It's like, and they're teaching them skills so that they have, because these women are just like put in the prison. There's nothing for them to do all day. And so the idea, for the reason that my understanding, the reason that this group from the hospital would go is they wanted to teach them something they could do to keep themselves occupied, so that they can do, and they would bring them, I think they were, as I remember, they were able to even bring them some supplies, like limited supplies. There were a lot of restrictions about it because it's the women's prison, and of course the government's in charge, so there were a lot of restrictions, but it was really neat that they were still able to do this. Like, this was not, this was allowed. They were like, okay, sure, you can come and do this, we're okay with it. Oh, and I also, now I don't have bread, but this is like crackers that are similar to, it's like they're flatbread crackers. If anybody would like a cracker, they are really good. They're like, if anybody would know, anybody? All right. Actually, when I tasted one this morning, I was like, this tastes like Yemen. It actually was my thought. Yeah. Is no. Anybody back here? If you'd like to. Sure. Okay, great.
I have his cookies.
That's fine. Any other questions that you guys might have had? Yeah, it's pretty. It's kind of. I mean, it would be when they had bread. It was like big flat bread that they would make, and you'd tear it up, and it would all be communal. So this is similar. It's just that this is cracker. It's a cracker form. I'm trying to remember what kind of flour. I think they did grind flour, but I don't actually remember what they used. I don't remember exactly what they used, but it seems like I remember something that I think that they grounded the flour, and they might have been able to buy it ground already. I'm not exactly sure. Probably depends on because most of them didn't have much money. I mean, they would all sleep on the floor in basically the room where I would have gone to visit with the women at nighttime. That's where they all sleep. They would all sleep on the floor. Usually they didn't have separate rooms. You just had like the one room and a bathroom, and that's basically what their houses were. And so they would sleep they'd all be lined up, because the whole family would all sleep together. Basically, they'd have just the little flat like sleeping bag type things that they would their little pallet thing that they'd sleep on. And they had big families, and usually the parents, you'd have the grandparents and the parents and the children all sleeping in one room, and then they would roll up the pallets during the day. Yeah, and it was all cement floor. You also did take, you always did take your shoes off when you went in. That was like a given. Like, and that was another thing, is you had to eat with your right hand because your left hand was unclean. So because that would be what you'd use that for the toilet, and then your right hand would be the one that you'd use for eating. So that was another little thing. Any other questions? No? Okay.
When you were there, you didn't get to share Christ with anybody?
I did not get to share Christ with anybody, no. At the hospital, we were able to have, they had like a morning Bible study, morning devotion. We had lots of times where we could be studying the Bible, but only in our compound. We didn't get to actually go out. You could not, I didn't get a chance to share. I was not with anybody who got to share God during that 3 weeks. It was just if you were with the foreigners who were Christians. Even the secret Christians, they were even very careful. Like, you just didn't share it because you never knew. If you're out in public, you don't know who's listening. You don't know that if they happen to mention, if we talked about Jesus, I mean, you could probably get away with that with saying God, because they'd be saying Allah, of course. But yeah, I did not ever get the chance. All I got to really do was I got the opportunity to show God's love. And that's really what I got the opportunity to do. And most of the people in that hospital who'd even been there a long time did not get the chance to see people come to Christ. There were a few, I do remember them, as I said, I do remember them saying that maybe there were one or two that, but it took really creating that relationship. They had to go out. That's why you went out into the village. You were always going out in the village and creating relationships with these people, because that was the thing, and it would take a long time. It's not an easy, Muslims converting to Christianity, that's one of the hardest things, I think, because it is so much it's a part of their culture. Their religion is so strict that it is so hard for them to, because if they choose to convert, not only does their family kick them out, but it's probably going to kill them. You know, as you hear about the honor killings and stuff, that's a real thing. Yeah, so and while I was there, the only thing that happened was, I remember that there was like a pirate ship off the coast of Yemen, that there was a big disaster that happened. And I remember them saying at one point, we've been there like maybe a week and a half or so, and they said, oh, well, we're not sure. It's like the embassy is basically saying Americans need to get out. We're not sure if you should stay. And we're like, no, we're gonna stay. It'll be, it was kind of that point of, we had to wait and see. And then it turned out that the embassy decided it was okay for us to say, or something like that. But I remember there being some issue like that. And so it was, and then what made it worse for my mom is, that point, all we really had was email. We couldn't call them or anything like that. So we finally got one email to them about halfway there. We're okay. It's, we're okay. We're still here. Everything's okay. And that's the only communication they got during that 3 weeks from us, because you just you didn't have, their cell phones were there, were kind of there, but you didn't have all the stuff, all the whole network. And of course, it being, you're out in the middle of these mountains. And actually, this ring is also something I got from Yemen. That was a belated birthday present, because I was there for my birthday. And I remember, I want to say, when he bought it for me, it was like less than $50, but it's real silver. And I found it this morning. I was like, yep, I still have it. So it was, yeah. So it was, It's very different. It's one of those things I haven't always gotten to talk about this a lot because I think a lot of people like a missions trip to Yemen, to the Middle East. It's kind of, yeah. So, any other questions? Okay, well, let's close in prayer then. Dear Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you so much for this time, Lord, when I was able to share about this time, Lord, this really special time in my life, Lord, and God, I have no idea what's going on in Yemen right now, Lord, but I just want to remember the people there now, Lord, who there. I know there are missionaries there, God, and I know there are people who are just hurting and need you so desperately, God. I just pray, Father God, that you would touch this country, Lord. Your spirit would minister to those who are there, Lord, who do know you, Lord, and that God, that you'll provide opportunities to bring hope to this very hopeless country. And pray, God, as we leave today, that you'll keep us safe and bring us back next week. In your name we pray.